In 1992, one man bet $10 billion against the British pound and countries shook. You watched governments panic as currencies collapsed. Interest hit 15%. Headlines blamed one investor, but millions paid longer. Could one trade reshape nations, ruin fortunes, rewrite history? Today we reveal the bet that shook the world and changed everything. Let's find out right now. Why the ERM felt like a trap in 1992. A currency union can sound like protection. But in 1992, for Britain and Italy, it began to feel like a locked door. The European exchange rate mechanism, known simply as the ERM, tries to hold Europe's currencies in a narrow corridor. Each currency gets a fixed range it must stay inside, anchored most tightly to the German Deutsche Mark, the strongest currency on the continent. On paper, it looks organized. In practice, it demands that countries with entirely different economies behave as if they are identical. Britain, in the early 1990s, was struggling. Inflation peaked near 10.9% in 1990, more than 3 times Germany's rate at the time. Normally, a country with high inflation lowers interest rates or adjusts currency value to loosen pressure. The ERM blocks both options. To keep the pound inside the allowed range, Britain must raise interest rates instead. That means more expensive loans, painful mortgages, and slower business activity. People notice the pressure fast, therefore confidence starts to thin. Italy sits in an even tighter corner. National debt climbed to 112% of GDP by 1992, one of the highest levels in Europe. Investors watch this number like a warning light. Government borrowing gets expensive. Unemployment pushes upward. The lira needs breathing room, but the ERM offers none. Italy must defend a currency range that no longer matches economic reality. The system expects discipline, but discipline only works when the foundations are equal. Germany runs a strong economy, low inflation, and high productivity. Britain and Italy are fighting slower growth, public debt, and rising costs. The ERM ignores these differences, but markets never play along. Traders, hedge funds, and global speculators start studying the imbalance like a puzzle with guaranteed answers. One currency begins to look pinned, predictable, targetable. Central banks insist the bans will hold. Politicians say the system ensures credibility. The public hears reassurance, but financial markets hear fear masking fragility. History pivots the moment belief breaks, and the numbers takes control. And somewhere, quietly, a trade begins to form that could shake nations. The billion-dollar gamble. Speculators see the crack. By early 1992, the British pound sat at a fixed rate. 1 pound equals 2.95 Deutsche Marks inside the ERM. Big investors run the math. The number feels artificial, too stiff, too clean, too fragile. George Soros, running the quantum fund, starts circling the pound like someone testing a weak fence. He knows Britain's inflation is near 7% in 1992, while Germany sits around 3%. Markets hate imbalance. And the question becomes simple. How long can London defend this level before something snaps? Soros places a bet most people can barely imagine. He shorts the pound. Not casually, not quietly. Reports later estimated his position at $10 billion. In currency terms, this means, if the pound falls, he earns. If it holds, he loses a massive amount. But he trusts the math more than the promises. Other traders smell the same weakness. Big names step in. Banks, hedge funds, currency desks. The pound becomes the center of a global staring contest. London insists it will defend the rate. But markets hear doubt in every press statement, every economic report, every hesitation. Then Italy enters the frame. The lira is also in the ERM. It also has red flags. Italy's debt is above 110% of GDP. Growth is slow. Inflation eats quietly at savings. The lira drifts toward the weakest edge of its allowed band, like a tide pulling toward a crack in the wall. Italy's central bank tries to steady it, but currency pressure moves faster than policy papers. So suddenly, the story changes shape. The pound looks like the headline. The lira looks like an aftershock waiting to happen. And while politicians talk stability, currency traders talk stress points, exit doors, and timing. Soros sees the weak link. Others see the weak system. Central banks see a storm forming, but storms are easier to predict than stop. The market eats fear faster than reassurance can spread. One bet begins to look less like risk and more like inevitability. And when one country cracks under pressure, another country nearby can lose $48 billion in reserves without firing a single shot. But who feels the shock first? The loud one or the quiet one? The day London blinked and everything collapsed. It's September 16, 1992. The markets opened and the pressure is immediate. Britain spent the morning defending its currency like a castle under siege. The pound is pinned inside the ERM, forced to stay above 2.778 Deutsche Marks. But it keeps slipping, so the Bank of England starts burning money to save it. Not metaphorically, literally. The Treasury sells billions of foreign currency reserves to buy pounds and push the price up. It works for minutes. Then the price sinks again. By midday, the UK government makes a drastic move. They raise interest rates from 10% to 12%. That kind of jump usually shocks a currency back to life. But this time, the market shrugs and keeps pushing. Therefore, London panics and announces another increase, 15% interest. A jump this big can freeze an economy, crush mortgages, and stall businesses overnight. And still, the pound falls. Traders smell the moment, phones explode, banks rush orders. Currency desks move faster than a parliament can react. George Soros keeps his position steady. He knows the rule of financial physics. Governments can run out of money, markets never do. By late afternoon, Britain gives up. The Chancellor, Norman Lamont, steps in front of cameras and says Britain will leave the ERM. No more defense, no more rate hikes, no more promises. The pound drops like a trapdoor opens. Within weeks, it falls around 15% against the Deutsche Mark and 25% against the US dollar. British exporters quietly celebrate cheaper global prices. But homeowners, businesses, and the government swallow the cost. So how much did the defense fail cost? The UK Treasury later confirms a direct loss of £3.3 billion, but other estimates push the real damage closer to £27 billion when long-term economic shock and intervention costs are included. The day gets a name fast. Newspapers printed in black capital letters. Black Wednesday. But while London grabs the headlines, Rome is staring at the same storm. The lira is sliding, reserves are melting, and Italy is about to lose 15% of its currency value in a single week. So why does almost no one talk about the second crash that hits just as hard? The crisis no one filmed, but millions felt. On September 13, 1992, 3 days before Black Wednesday, Italy already cracks. The lira is the first to officially break from the ERM, not the pound. This matters because people remember the pound crashing. They forget Italy crashed first. Before the exit, Italy is burning cash to defend its currency, just like Britain. The Bank of Italy spends $48 billion in reserves in weeks trying to hold the line. Think about that. A country spending the value of a small national economy just to buy time. It fails. On September 13th, the government admitted defeat. Italy pulls the lira out of the ERM, and the currency drops fast. Within days, it loses about 15% of its value. By the end of the crisis period, the total fall reached roughly 25 to 30% against the Deutsche Mark. That means everything Italy imports gets more expensive. Fuel, food, medicine, raw materials. Prices don't jump slowly, they move fast. Inflation hit 5.3% in 1992 and kept rising into 1993. Businesses feel it first. Families feel it hardest. At the time, Italy's debt sat at 112% of GDP, one of the highest in the world. The country is already learning. The currency storm pushes it further. To stop money running away, the central bank raises interest rates over 13%. That decision stops traders, but it also stalls the economy at home. Loans get pricier. Growth slows. Jobs get shaky. Politicians in Rome quietly panic. The British debate happens on television. Italy happens behind closed doors. However, leaked reports show ministers openly arguing whether the country can even afford another week of intervention. One senior official admitted later, "The lira was attacked, and we ran out of weapons faster than expected." Meanwhile, currency traders treat the lira like an open target. They smell weakness, so they double down. The moment Britain exits days later, the spotlight moves to London. Rome fades from view. The silence makes it feel smaller, but the damage is huge. And here's the sting. While governments fight fire with interest rates and reserve cash, one man walks away with over $1 billion in profit from the upheaval. So how did a single trade outweigh the defenses of entire nations, and who paid the real price for it? The trade that made billions. The tremor that cost nations. In September 1992, George Soros launched the largest currency position in history. His quantum fund builds a short trade against the British pound worth about $10 billion US. This means one thing: he profits if the pound collapses. And it does. The moment the UK exits the ERM on September 16, 1992, the pound drops 15% against the Deutsche Mark. Within weeks, it fell 25% against the US dollar. The math works in Soros's favor, fast. His fund books about $1.1 billion in profit in days. Some estimates go even higher when including partner funds and follow-on trades. But the real story runs deeper than one famous win. While London headlines scream the man who broke the Bank of England, Italy is quietly bleeding. Their central bank burns $48 billion defending the lira. Meanwhile, Britain spends £3.3 billion trying to save the pound. Both fights end the same way. The currencies sink anyway. So think about the size of that contrast. Governments lose billions trying not to lose. One trader wins billions because they lose. That reversal shakes people. Newspapers explode. The Sun runs the brutal headline, "Soros sucks up the cash." British politicians say they were blindsided. Italian officials say the storm hit faster than anyone realized. However, later documents show warnings existed months earlier. They just believed markets would blink first. The markets never blinked. The deeper impact lands later. UK interest rates spiked to 15% for a matter of hours to defend the pound. Italy holds rates above 13% for weeks. That means mortgages cost more, business loans cost more, even government debt costs more. So everyday families feel the aftershock longer than any trader feels the thrill of a winning position. Therefore, the public learns a hard lesson that currency decisions made in quiet rooms can rewrite millions of lives. And the biggest twist? Soros later says this was not an attack on Britain. It was a bet that politicians would struggle to defend a system built on hope, not math. So if one trader could shake Europe with $10 billion, imagine what happens years later when markets move $5.3 trillion every single day. And the guardrails are thinner than ever. Could a crisis like that still happen, but bigger next time? The aftermath nobody saw clearly until years later. A few months after Black Wednesday, the UK economy does something strange. Instead of collapsing, it begins to grow. Fast. Faster than expected. Here's why people get confused. In 1990, the UK was in recession. GDP growth is below zero. But by 1993, after leaving the ERM and letting the pound float, the economy grew 2.2%, then 3.7% in 1994. Inflation, once over 10% in 1990, dropped below 3% by 1993. The very crisis that looked like disaster became the turning point. Economists call this breaking point pain, then reboot. But Italy lives on a different timeline. The lira devalued 3 times between 1992 and 1995. At one point, it dropped over 30% against the Deutsche Mark compared to early 1992 levels. Italian inflation jumps above 5% again. Borrowing costs stay high for years. Unemployment slowly climbed over 10% by 1998. The recovery is slower, heavier, and quieter, but it still reshapes the country. So while the UK narrative becomes one of rebound, Italy carries the longer burn. However, one strange detail hides in plain sight. Both countries, after all the damage, chart totally opposite futures. Britain stays out of the euro. Italy fights to join it. By 1999, Italy officially entered the eurozone. The same country that loses massive reserves defending the lira chooses a currency union that removes the lira forever. That choice rewrites everything. No more currency defense. No more lira interest rate shocks. No more solo devaluations. The power over money moves from Rome to Frankfurt, to the European Central Bank. So think about the turn here. 1992 forces Italy to fight for its currency. 1999 convinced Italy to surrender it willingly. The UK does the reverse. It escapes, then guards the pound like a trophy. So the crisis does more than shake currencies. It redraws economic identity. And one more detail that still scars memory. Italy's total cost defending the lira in 1992 reaches about 48 billion US dollars in reserves, an amount larger than the country's entire education budget that year. Which leads to the next question. What happens when a nation saves the banks but forgets the people, and the bill quietly reaches 1 trillion in public debt before anyone demands answers? History leaves clues and questions that refuse sleep. The next story is bigger. Click the next video on your screen now before it disappears. Another story is waiting for you.